One of my favourite things, talking to people, and
Easy.
I love it, and that's what we've got, a whole hour and chat with someone so that you can get to know that person a little more, but more importantly, so that you can just get an insight into how other people might think and feel about life, about things, how they choose to deal with things that may or may not be different from the way you choose to deal with things yourself. But just the whole concept that being high on life is really up to you. You get to decide how you see something. You may not always get to choose what happens to you, but you always, always, always get to choose how you deal with that. And how you deal with it is all about how you feel, and how you feel is really what life's all about, from when you're really, really little to as you grow and go into your elder years. And our very, very special guest that I'm excited to speak to today is Ben Morley. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me on your show, Lily. I'm really excited and honoured, I guess.
Well, I'm delighted because you have a show on J Air, and you have an amazing life experience that we'll touch on in a little bit. But you're now a recovery coach, a mentor to many, many other people. You're a speaker and you talk about addictions,
yes,
having gone through them. And so you have a voice that really not only needs to be heard, but that I'm sure people also find as a resource that you are absolutely invaluable.
Sure, definitely, Lily, and thank you so much for that. I mean, you know, to be a recovery coach or to have that lived experience is really important to try to get the message out there, not just to the Jewish community, but to the wider community alike. I believe that every human being should have some form of life coaching or some type of way to, like we were touching upon earlier, a different view or different ways of looking at life on life's terms. I do have a show on every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. called Road to Recovery. I do a lot of youth mentoring. I go around Australia to schools and talk about my road to recovery, coming from active addiction and into recovery. And I think it's really important because, I mean, growing up for me, there was never that person that I could relate to or that I could relate to in terms of having that lived experience or going through active addiction and now into recovery. So I think it's really important, like you spoke about, for people to have that ongoing understanding. I guess that's more about self-exploration, about what we can actually achieve.
Absolutely. And we'll do this again at the very end, but just give out your phone number right now
thanks,
as well.
Well, it's 0427 165 012, or you can email me at drug-ed@outlook.com.
And really, really slowly, your phone number, please.
0427 165 012.
I'm always the person looking for the pen. Ben, how amazingly wonderful is your life right now? Take us through the wedding. Take us through the baby.
So much. I tell you what, Lily, life on life's terms. Well, if you would have asked me that question some 1,381 days ago, would have been a bit of a different story. I mean, obviously a lot of people listening to my program have heard about my life journey. You know, I was a drug addict for nearly 19 years. I was heavily addicted to cocaine and methamphetamine. I couldn't stop using. I was stuck in the cycle of addiction. I had so much love and ongoing support, but nothing really changed my thinking. I was stuck in that cycle of addiction. I couldn't break out of it.
Tell me about how you're feeling today with a baby almost here.
Well, I tell you what, after I completed my rehab, I did 9 months treatment. I then came back into life, I guess. I'm an avid member of the Rooms of NA. And I tell you what, you know, the gifts of gratitude, Lily, and that's what really my program comes down to. It's that attitude of gratitude. It's waking up every morning with a purpose, with an ambition, with drive, with focus, like we were talking about earlier. I know you dip your foot into so many different aspects of life, like we were talking about, that I really commend that, to have a passion or to have a focus. And I guess for me, it's about that attitude of gratitude and living life on life's terms.
What I've noticed and what I notice around me is that so many people focus on what they don't have,
yes,
on what is still missing, on instead of looking at what they actually have right here, right now.
Sure, and it's just that basic, you know, day-to-day understanding, Lily. I mean, for me, I write a gratitude list every day. Before I go to bed, I make my amends. I live through all my resentments. Just that gratitude of being able to not just resort to a drug or drink, but to be be able to be happy within ourselves and just to be born and to be living and to be alive. I mean, it sounds really cliched, but when you really bring your mindset back to the basic understanding of waking up and going to sleep, you know, I didn't get clean to lead a mediocre life, Lee, and I'm sure a lot of people just amble through that.
I did not get clean to lead a mediocre life is so powerful.
Sure, and people are, so stuck in their ways.
Ben, tell me what's going through your head in terms of this baby.
Oh.
I know it's a fun, exciting time,
yes,
but there must be all kinds of different things that cross your mind as you're going to sleep at night.
Sure. I mean, even when you keep asking the question, I guess I find myself deflecting from what's actually really going on, don't I? Well, look, it just wasn't on the cards for me, Lily. I didn't think that I would get married, find the most amazing woman of my dreams, get married, settle down, have a baby. I mean, for so many years, you know, nearly 2 decades, I never turned up to my friends' weddings. I didn't have that gratitude for other people. I didn't appreciate my friends and my family. And I was just ambling through life. I was just existing and not living.
I have to ask you this question.
Sure.
Have you, and are you at the point where you really and truly believe that you deserve to have this baby and this happiness?
Yes, of course, but mainly it's about my program for me, and I don't want to harp upon the 12 steps. I'll go into it a bit later on. It's just a different way of perceiving life.
And we know the 12 steps. So this the focus of this show is really about you and what's inside your head. So,
like you said, and like I teach, you know, to a lot of my clients and my families, it's about CBT. It's cognitive behavior therapy. So, you know, like I like to think of it, when you change the way you look at the world, the things you look at change. And so for me now, that serotonin and dopamine relief, that ability to get pleasure out of basic day-to-day activities or life, is just so rewarding for me. So even I still go through the same emotions. I mean, having a baby, it's so exciting to be able to bring a human into this world. I mean, that's the serotonin, you know, the natural high that we get, like your program indicates, out of life. It's having a wedding, getting married, having a baby, seeing it grow up, you know, seeing your football club win a premiership flag. It's just those basic things in life that we find that appreciation through.
Absolutely. And with everything that you've learned, with everything that you're sharing, how do you see translating that into a baby that you get to mould from birth?
And I must admit, lately, I guess over my last 3.5 years in recovery, I have found myself, my little idiosyncrasies or things that I do day to day, I find my dad in myself and my mother in myself in that mix. And it's fascinating that you can create this human that you have such an amazing influence on, that they become, all their beliefs and their value systems are all created from the person and the mindset that you have. So it's a really powerful tool.
Are you talking to her already through the tummy?
Oh, yes. I take my hat off to women around the world. I tell you what, Lily, to be able to have this human growing inside you and touching the stomach and the hands and the face. I won't say the sex of the baby in case my dad's watching, because he and my grandmother don't want to know the sex. We had a little battle of the sexes ourselves in terms of
whatever baby
as long
it
as
is.
it's happy and healthy.
Amen.
And I'm really lucky that I've got Paula to be able to lean on, who's dug me out of the cycle of addiction and just given me the sense to be grateful just to wake up every morning and go to bed at night.
So Ben, let's just focus on Paula for a minute, Ben, because that decision for you to fall in love is wonderful, miraculous. It's a feeling and it's a passion, and I absolutely get how you can do that. But for you, coming from where you were to take it to the next step and say, yes, not only is this a passion, but I'm going to marry this woman. What were some of the things that went through your mind as you were, before you even shared it with her? Yeah, well, I would say, you know, that some of the questions you would think after going through active addiction into recovery was, am I good enough? Is she going to love me? Am I enough? You know, am I content with who I am? Does she appreciate me? But all that just completely was just like water under a bridge, Leader, because through my recovery, when I got clean, you know, even in my first year, I was so focused on just doing the opposite of drug taking and focusing on recovery and being humble and all the spiritual principles, like, you know, honesty, integrity, these core belief values that I just knew she was the one. I was so excited. I was happy. I was motivated. I was driven. I was ambitious. There was never really a doubt in my mind about whether or not. It was so natural and raw and real that it was just really worked. And when you were standing there on the day of your wedding in front of the minister, when you were looking at her, and realizing that this really is it. What was it that was going through your
starting
head?
to get emotional. It was a build-up, I must admit. I was a bubbling, mumbling mess just before with my groomsmen on the way there. I mean, it's all exciting to plan it and to have an engagement and the build-up towards the wedding, because Paula is a bit of an introvert. She's not really, socially, likes a lot of attention. So coming from a very small, I guess, Asian family of a couple of people, she's come into this plethora of crazy Burman brigade, we call it, in our Jewish community, and especially with my over-the-top, over-emotional, overpowering family, just so much love. And that was the whole thing as well, Lily. It wasn't just the marriage of me and Paula. It was all of my parents' friends and my community that I've grown up with, that for so long wondered whether I was dead or alive. People who saw me with a needle hanging out of my arm on St Kilda Road. People who thought I was dead. People who saw me in prison. Like, just so many thoughts that it wasn't really ever Ben's time to shine, that it was just euphoric. It was such a really special occasion. Even to this day, I've never received so much love and support and feedback from not even just my parents' friends, but just community and people alike. Even people ringing up on the radio program. And I went out for dinner with a few of my closest friends the other night, and they're saying they just can't believe that I'm having a baby. And after a while, I really have to start and think of it. Why are all these people saying they just cannot believe that I'm having a child? I guess I bring it back. And when I was in active addiction, you completely put your emotions aside. You're stuck in this cycle of guilt and shame and remorse and resentment that I actually didn't... There were so many thousands of nights that I forgot who I was and I forgot what I went through, and it's really easy not to. I need to remember those darkest days and nights. So I don't
really believe that you do need to remember those darkest days and nights. I believe that you live in the now, and the now is what's really important. And with the appreciation, even the fact that you have so many friends from school and from early days, I don't know if you're aware how many people have very few or even zero friends in Melbourne today.
Sure, and I just worked with a person, a 60-odd-year-old now. I just met him for coffee. He was struggling. I had to talk him through a lot of, attitude of gratitude things and a different kind of mindset. I'm going to take him to a few meetings over the next few weeks. And this is one individual that doesn't have much family, doesn't have many friends, doesn't have that ongoing love and support that I guess a lot of the times people take for granted.
And this tenacity and energy and everything that you have right now, you mentioned that you were addicted for 19 years.
Sure, yes. 19
years is an enormous amount of time.
It's a long time.
What do you attribute to the fact that your parents never, ever, in 19 years, I'm sure they gave up on you in their own minds, but not in reality?
Sure. Well, I guess eventually, Lily, after, and this is what I educate families and people alike, and especially when I go and do talks, is that, it comes to a point where the parents have to detach with love. They have to stop enabling. They have to stop giving their loved one who's addicted money or support or accommodation or pay their rent or their phone bill or whatever it is, because it's really easy as parents. They're emotionally attached. They have this bias that sometimes they need to break out of that cycle. And the only way for me to, they spent hundreds of thousands on rehabs, interventions, psychologists, let alone the drug use that I did, and that was gambling along with that. 1,300 days ago, I was 43 kilos. I had looked like I was pale in consideration to what I was there now. It was really hard to break out of, but they had to detach. But they had to cut me off. They had to stop supporting me, and that was a really challenging, hard time for them. But that was the only way for me to actually sit in my cycle of misery and actually make that change.
So the question I'm going to ask you now about that and about your relationship with your parents is, obviously you love your parents. Obviously you feel that they're the most incredible. I'm not asking you that obvious question. What I'm asking you is, when you really think about your parents, tell me how you really feel and think about your parents.
Well, I numbed it for such a long period of time, but I want the listeners to be aware that addiction is a disease. It's not a choice. I didn't choose to ruin my life and put my parents through thousands of sleepless nights wondering if I was dead or alive. What you go through in that cycle, when I get 1 or 2 days clean, was I start to have that guilt of, what am I putting my dad through who works so hard? Why am I making my mum have more anxiety? And she had a heart attack during the time when I was in active addiction.
When you were in active active addiction and
Sure.
they were still, did you know that they were 100% supporting you? Did you have these same thoughts about this is what I'm doing to them?
Sure. I always had that conscience, and I was always a really lovable, endearing son, I guess, that really loved them so much. But the drugs were able to complete the powerful nature of especially isomethamphetamine and what it does to the brain and the neuro pathways and the ability to make conscious choices, how it's related to the pleasure centers in your mind, which is your frontal cortex of the brain. Everything that it did to me inside my brain, how I was thinking, deterred me from really understanding what was going on. I wasn't of sound mind. I wasn't Ben Morley. That wasn't me knowingly taking a drug to ruin my parents' lives. But as soon as you start to get clean, that appreciation and gratitude for them came back. So I did 9 months in a rehab. I then... when I completed my time there, I ended up going and living with them because I was just so happy that they were alive while I was alive, and I was just so grateful that they spent all this money and love and support to help me save my life. Because to be honestly, I would be dead or in jail without my father's support today.
But when you say going back and living with them, had you done that a number of times before and it hadn't worked out?
It definitely didn't work.
What was the difference this time? When you went
I was, and like you talk about, I was present. I was alive. I was happy. I was content. I didn't feel this because anyone can just stop taking drugs or alcohol. It's a matter of staying stopped. And usually it's not just about the drug or the alcohol. It's more about this, I guess, God-shaped hole, I guess, that you need to fill in order to get that validation of what you were actually doing.
I read something really, really interesting and something I'd never even considered before. And that is about addiction. Yeah. And that is the reason we do anything in life is to experience joy and happiness.
Sure.
So people who are taking drugs or people who drink alcohol or people who do all of these things, they also just want to be happy. It's not a bad thing that you start with. It's what happens after that. It's like when it stops making you happy, and that's a fine line.
And look, I guess there's 14% of humans have addictive personalities, and I take my hat off to some of my friends or family members or people out there who can manage and who can take drugs or drink recreationally. For me, I can't do that. But for people out there, it's really about filling a void. And look, everyone likes to have that bit of escape from life on life's terms or day to day. Some people meditate, some people take yoga. A lot of people can have a drink of wine with a steak on a Friday night and then just continue about their time. But for people who are addicts or in recovery like myself, it can be a very difficult thing to be able to manage.
It's that fine line where you're not having fun anymore. It's that fine line where you're not feeling good anymore.
Yep.
And it's the same thing for exercise. It's the same thing for cleanliness.
Sure.
It's the same thing for all these people who may not have as much of a big problem.
Yep.
But it's where anything to excess
and that's
what the
And that's when I talk about it at schools and to families as well. It's not just about that, even about phones or screens or Nintendo or gym or chocolate or protein, whatever it is. It's all about living life on life's terms and be able to manage that. It's about balance. It's about having an outcome and a desire and the ability to have live a life where you have that balance and understanding, which I find really important.
But we're back with Ben Morley, who is not only an incredibly passionate human being, but is doing so much for the wider community. It's any kind of addiction, whether it's food or alcohol or drugs or just any kind of addiction, is tough. And I don't believe there's anybody that hasn't had to go through their own mind wanderings about something like that.
You're right, Lily. It's all about challenging the mind. And like we were talking about during the break, it is important. I mean, when I was at school, no one really came in and spoke about, addiction or different ways of viewing the world or life on life's terms. I find it so much more powerful when I can have that lived experience. So when I can speak to a lot of the students, and mind you, when I go to some of the schools, I can't leave. I mean, after I talk, they line up. They want to know that, because everyone always knows someone who's struggling.
Right. And Ben, when you do something for the pleasure of it, you do it because it makes you feel good.
Yep.
What is it that is that bridge to this is fantastic and I can do it in and not moderation? I don't ever want to use the word moderation, because when you're feeling good, you're just feeling good.
Sure.
But what's the bridge between this is feeling good, whoa, this is a bit much for today, let's put it away for another day?
Yeah, well, and that's the overbearing nature about the disease of addiction. A drug or a drink can be so overbearing, or a Nintendo game, or gym, or having a protein shake, that your brain starts to adapt so easily to addictive behaviours that you find yourself stuck in it, and it's really, really difficult to be able to get out. And the only way to really do that is to change your thought process and challenge your way of thinking.
And I was binge watching a series on Netflix, and I thought, shivers, binge watching in itself. You want to watch the next one, you want to watch the next one.
Yes,
it's also.
Ask my wife Paula every night. I mean, last night I was watching, I think, was Behind Mossad, all about the Israeli Mossad and behind the scenes and the people. I find myself just so it was so invigorating. I was glued to the screen. That it's real. I have to practice, being able to, go to sleep, turn everything off, switch off, turn off. Because for me, in active addiction, I had everything everywhere all the time. It was so unnatural for me that when I got sent or sort of beaten up to the point where I got put in the back of my dad's car, punched in the face by my Israeli brother-in-law, and taken up to what I call a Big Brother meets Alcatraz meets the army, to go to a sleep in a dark room without anything for 97 days was a real challenging thing, to be able to challenge all your emotions and actually start to get real and honest as to what's really going on for me.
What was that first step? What was the first step towards honesty?
That's what we practice in a 12-step program, Lily. It's surrendering. It's knowing that I'm powerless over the disease of addiction, and that I have to trust a higher power. And so for me, it was just surrendering. It was getting vulnerable. It was getting humble, which is a really challenging thing in itself. I mean, I work with so many families every week that it's a very challenging thing to have to say to a parent or a loved one or a brother or a sibling when I run interventions or education evenings, that people always think their opinion is correct. It's a really challenging thing to tell someone, well, hang on, this is another way of looking at it. This is what, from my lived experience and my professional opinion, you don't always know best about everything. And sometimes, even particularly for loved ones who are struggling in addiction or alcoholism, usually either the mother or the father is the enabler. And it can get frustrating, but like you said, I get so passionate about it because when I'm able to change the way a parent thinks about addiction, or to change the behaviour, or to detach from their loved one, I mean, you don't realise how many family members are even now enabling the addiction to continue because they don't have the tools or the knowledge to be able to know what to do.
But even with the tools and the knowledge, and I know this from personal experience in different areas,
sure,
what I've stopped doing is saying, this is going to give you the result you want. I know better. I've been through it. What the difference now is that I say, look, keep doing what you're doing as long as you need to do it. Go right ahead.
Yep.
You're going to come back to this spot again because doing the same thing has the same results.
Exactly.
If you try this is a result that could come out of it. If you try this result might come out of it. Try it. You want to go back to what you're doing? God bless. But people hear better when you're not telling them what's wrong, but you're enabling them to make good choices.
Of course, I love it, Lily. You should be living in recovery and giving support to some of my clients. But you're right, nothing changes if nothing changes. And so many times, families who I work with their loved ones will go and keep doing what they're doing, and they'll come back to me 6 weeks later, 4 months later, 1 day later. Ben, you were right, or Ben, we understand now, or Ben, we're going to take on that support.
Because, Ben, for 19 years,
sure,
what you were doing in some way or other was working for you.
Yes.
You might have gotten frustrated, but it worked for you. Otherwise, you would have done something different.
Yeah, you're right. And it's so easy to keep continuing to do something without consequences or ramifications. I mean, there were no consequences to me. I knew I would never be in a long-term prison or dead or on the streets because I always had my father or my mother to back me up because I was able to manipulate and challenge them and lie and be deceitful and all those things, which was really easy for me to do.
Ben, do you remember when you were back in primary school before any of this started, what are some of the memories memories that you have just of being a child before it even all began.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you told me when I was, 12 years old, about to have my bar mitzvah at Mount Scopus College with so much love and support that, 25 years later I'd be lying on the streets of St Kilda with a needle hanging out my vein, I would have laughed. But looking back, I had a really loving, happy, upbringing childhood. I was an actor. I was a performer. I loved making people laugh. I finished school. I did a Bachelor of Performing Arts at Monash University.
When you were back in primary school, do you remember any teachers that still stand out?
I love some of my sports teachers, or my prep teacher, Mrs. Curfey.
What kind of sports were you into?
I loved all sports. Yeah, I'm a sport fanatic. I'm a football fanatic. I go to Ajax with my dad every Saturday. I go to Essendon with him every week. I try to teach my nephews about football and skills and everything like that.
And siblings? You've got sisters?
Yes, I have a sister called Chloe, amazing superwoman. She had 4 kids. She married an amazing guy called Diego. They've got an amazing family, and he gave me the tough Israeli love that I needed in order to get clean and change my life, because people were tiptoeing around me. And mind you, being a performer, I could get very manipulative. I would justify all my old behaviours. I used my parents' love to my advantage. I mean, I would literally carry dog biscuits in my pocket, Lily.
You were a smart kid.
I was a smart kid, and I used my deceiving nature when I was stuck in that cycle to get what I want.
I think when you're really young, rather than deceiving,
yes.
And even manipulating isn't a great word, but you're discovering what works for you.
Sure. And
because you were so smart, you were just going after what made you feel good.
Of course.
There was nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But, is Chloe older or younger?
She's 4 years younger.
And do you remember when she was born?
Vaguely, I guess. I mean,
do you remember having a baby sister? Did you have responsibilities?
I guess I did have responsibilities. I was really lucky. I mean, my mum was just over loving, so emotional, that we had a really, positive and healthy and amazing upbringing. We were so spoiled. We always got everything we wanted. I don't know if that was a testament eventually to my finding addiction, or to be stuck in that.
Do you remember if you were jealous of Chloe when she was little?
No, I never really got jealous. I was able to play with myself, play in my own time and have my own experiences, and live my life happily. I guess.
Did you have to schlep her around with you as a little girl?
Not really. She had a lot of friends, and my friends were friendly with her friends. Some of my friends went out with some of her friends. But eventually we did go through the Rainbow Serpent festivals and all the parties together, and I guess I introduced her to that scene, so to speak. But, when I look back now, she went through all my addiction with me as well. And I even now, I start to reflect and think what my family members must have gone through while I was stuck in that selfish cycle. It's a very hard thing to try to fathom or understand. But because, some people never break out of it. And look, Lily, it is a Just for Today program. I can't tell you that I'm not going to use drugs or alcohol tomorrow or next week or next year or when I turn 80. But for today, if I put my head on the pillow without resorting to a drink or the drug, that's my purpose.
And more importantly, you can feel good without it. Like, you can really feel good without it.
And I guess my mentality around it, my parents came to visit me in rehab over so many years. They've seen so many people from different walks of life. God bless my dad. The biggest thing he ever did was have some beers at university with his mates. But, what I'm trying to get at is that for me, I've always found it a really unique opportunity to not put a drug or a drink into my body is a very a rare thing to do. Most humans don't do that. Most people either have a drink on a weekend or a drug, or use recreationally or on big occasions or celebrations. To not actually put a drink or a drug into your system for a period of time is a very unique thing to be able to do. I
remember going off coffee cold turkey for a long time.
Sure.
I'm back on coffee now.
Okay.
But for me, it was a big deal because I was drinking so much coffee.
Yeah.
Chloe is your younger sister.
Sure.
Did she start drinking alcohol? Did she try any of the drugs?
Oh, no, she always tried the drug. I mean, most people from our community or our upbringing or my school, everyone has a dabble or, dips their foot in the pond, so to speak, and has those experiences. Some people take longer to get out of them. Some people can manage them. It all depends, I guess, on the powerful or the willingness of the individual. But for me, I just, I love the feeling of it. And people often forget that drugs and alcohol can kill as well. It's the disease of addiction. So that feel good, that pleasure center, that serotonin and dopamine relief, I've now found to be able to get out of day-to-day things. But I'll tell you what, Lily, I'm not perfect. My program's not perfect. I still have triggers, and using thoughts and things that happen for me that I have to go through and deal with through life.
And you don't have to be perfect is the point.
You're right. And that's what I tried to do for my first 12 months of recovery. I went to 400 NA meetings. I got a sponsor. I got a service position. I got a home group. I now have sponsees. I wanted to have the perfect program for the perfect recovering addict. But I realize now over the last couple of years that it's okay to not be okay. I can have some down days.
And with a child, once your child is born, you are going to have to learn that you are not in control and nothing is perfect anymore.
Yep, and it's not all about me. And for once, it's about someone else. Like, I'm not just living to give myself that self-satisfaction or seeking that validation from so many people, which I longed for so long. I can now focus all my attention and energy and help towards the baby.
Yes, and how amazing is it that the timing is always perfect.
Oh, we always speak about the timing, me and Paul. I mean, we only just met maybe 20 months ago, and what we've gone through over the last 20-month journey, and the fact that she's able to work with me, and how much time we spent together. I mean, call it a touch of codependency, I guess, but we're just so grateful and happy that we've spent so many thousands of hours, and along with Ellie, my daughter, who was a package gift when I met Paula, we've just had so much time together and been through so much in such a short period of time that we have a very unique and special connection that goes really deep.
And it sounds like it was quite an adjustment for Paula and Ellie to come into your family, because as loving as they are, they sound very typically Jewish and overwhelming.
Yes, very full on. I mean, even tonight we've got Shabbat dinner. I said to Paula, she's 8 months pregnant, just chill out at home with Ellie and her friend. That's okay. You can just relax, because it can get really hectic. And Paula and her mum, what a mother-in-law I've got. I'm so grateful. She's taking us to Israel in September and the Greek islands. So all these gifts of recovery. I didn't have petrol in my car. I didn't have $1 in my pocket. I hung out at pokey venues. I had rode a bicycle because I couldn't afford to drive my car. I pawned my car at the pawnbrokers just down here, funnily enough, or not so funnily enough, in between my father's office and my brother-in-law's chicken shop. I just gave him my car and I ended up getting cocaine or whatever it was. But just having money in my account and petrol in my car and food on my table and to go to Coles with my wife to get food, that's what my program comes down to, that basic gratitude of life.
So I don't think anybody would describe you as very calm and reserved.
No.
And you have mentioned that you're cognizant that your wife needs that at the moment.
Yes.
Are you able to hook into your calm Zen self for her when it's just the two of you
and
together?
That's the most challenging thing that I've found in my last 1,300 days in recovery, or three years, 10 months, is that ability to find that sense of calm and to unwind and to detach and to meditate and to come to a break, because my brain doesn't stop from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. That ability to be kind to oneself and detach and relax, that's where Paula really guides me and helps me and is able to manage my ongoing crazy nature, that I need to switch off. I need Paula to give me that hard support.
Are you able to meditate?
Yeah, sure. And we have this system that we go through, which Paul has found when we first met, these basic tracks of type of meditation to be able to just sit and be content with oneself. And this is what I learned through rehab as well. And even in the transitional housing program, that thoughts on a stream, put your thoughts on a log, let the log drift down the stream. Let thoughts come and go into your head, but not buy into your thoughts. I mean, even in turn, and this is what I do with some of my clients, working through worries, breaking down what a worry is. Why do we worry? How can you unwind that worry and work out, what's the point in worrying about something if it's eventually going to happen anyway, and different ways of challenging your energy into positive things. Because we think about, on average, our brain thinks of about 80,000 thoughts every day, and 60,000 of those thoughts are thoughts that we thought of yesterday. So we're only really generating a certain amount of new thoughts in your head at one time. And the ability, what I've learnt, and I highly recommend everyone to watch, it's called Heal. It's also on Netflix, is how our beliefs, our attitudes and our thoughts, which is what your program is about, determine how we live day to day.
Very much so. That's exactly it. That's very, very much so. And can I also suggest that you get Morris's old-fashioned playlist, because in terms of calm, I mean, seriously, that old time, like music of the 30s and 40s, even the bop stuff, it just calms you in a different way than what music does today. And then once you get into baby songs for the babies and all of that, it's all good. Are you also at a place where you are not down on yourself for those 19 years of addiction, where you can see that is was also a blessing in your life?
Yes, really good question. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe everything from lived experience, that was what was meant to happen to my life. I believe I went through that, so I'm able now to give back to the addict that still suffers. I believe everything I've gone through has given me that lived experience and that knowledge. I mean, I've just completed my AOD in mental health, a certificate 4. I'm now studying my counsel degree. I've become an addiction specialist. I just want to keep on learning. I want to keep on studying. I want to keep on bettering myself. I know it sounds really cliched and old-fashioned, but, knowledge is key, I find,
knowledge
Lily.
is absolutely key.
And working with humans one-on-one, I mean, that's what I'm a people's person. Like yourself, I love speaking to humans on a deep emotional level, and that's how we learn more about ourselves, by helping others.
Absolutely. And there are some people that have a definite focus in their lives, and that's their total interest, whereas you and I are both generalists. We can multitask. We're interested in a lot of different things.
Yes.
And the huge challenge is that all of those things are accessible now.
Yes. And that's what I've loved as well. It's breaking down those awkward boundaries that sometimes family members have with each other. It's rediscovering those conversations that people don't want to have with their loved one who's suffering. And mainly it's about having that understanding with people. And being able to relate to them, to life on life's terms and what's really going on for them, which I find interesting.
Now, Ben, because you meet so many different people from different walks of life, they may have the commonality of seeking help, but are you able to observe, talk to, and look at someone and say, okay, they think differently to me, they react differently to me, and it's okay, where you see people doing different things and it's still okay with you, that they don't have to be the same way?
Yes, sure. And look, everyone judges, Lily. All humans, naturally, we judge people. But if you have that awareness and you're able to always own your part to play in every situation, I mean, I'm starting to work in mediation and allowing people to acknowledge their loved one or, estranged relationships. As long as you acknowledge your part to play and you have your awareness about your behaviour, that's all anyone can really have. But in answering your question, I will call out parents or family members who are still enabling old behaviours and allowing their loved one to still struggle with addiction.
Of course.
Because I've had people die. I've had friends die in the rooms from overdoses or new drugs that are out there on the market. I've had people in really, hostile situations. Some of my best friends are in jail at the moment, in terms of addictive personalities and what they've done. So I have no worries, which is a challenging thing in my role, to be able to call people out and challenge them and explain to them, no, well, this is what you're thinking. This is what I believe is the best thing for your loved one. Because really it's about, and the enjoyment I get out of actually getting people clean. Some of my people that I've worked through who are stuck in that cycle now, they're 1, 2, 3 years clean. That joy in itself and seeing the parents' joy from them is an amazing accomplishment.
Of course. And calling people out where you see it's necessary is absolutely it. I actually asked the question for a different reason.
Sure.
And the reason, and what I was coming from when I was asking that question, is that what I've realized when I can look at somebody, realize that they have a completely different set of values. They have a completely different way of looking at life. I can now look at them without dismissing them, without making them wrong, but just say, you know what, this is where our commonality lies. But wow, how interesting, and what have I learned from the fact that you're able to, and it's still, I mean, it's always a judgment because, you do things, but sometimes it's also a great learning experience.
Sure, and that's what I've learned through the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, that we look for the similarities, not the differences. I mean, I can sit there in an NA meeting and see someone who's grown up, on the streets of Broadmeadows or something and didn't have an education or family, or comes from a dysfunctional family or a heroin addict or whoever it is, differences, but we look for the similarities. So I really, I find myself sometimes when I find myself in that judgment mode, I take a step back, and that's the core beliefs that I learned through going through the rooms and going through rehabs, that I'm now able to appreciate people for their own values and beliefs and try not to judge. But that's where you can adapt, like yourself. I'm sure you can adapt to people's personalities and work on that person's wavelength to try to achieve the best outcome.
Right. And you're talking about Shabbat dinner tonight with your parents and family. And did people even realise what your parents were going through in those first years?
Well, it was,
What was it like for them as part of a Jewish community, which is so judgmental?
Really hard. And like I said, I had my dad on last week, which was amazing. My mum's come on the program. I had drug dealers going to my father's office. I had police and sheriffs going to my mum's house. I had people calling them all hours of the night. I had my best friends and my family members calling my parents, waking them up. Heard that I was in an Israeli prison for a few days. Just the stories that they'd hear. They've seen Ben Morley bang his head against telephone poles on St Kilda Road at 3 a.m. Like the irrational thoughts that I was thinking or that went through their head. Even now, I will never fully understand.
Tell me the thoughts that go through your head today. Tell me the thoughts that go through your how you feel when you see your parents looking at you with joy.
Yes.
Connect to the feeling and tell me about those.
Sure,
great
it's an amazing euphoric feeling of just trust and understanding and love and an ongoing gratitude for just the appreciation of how lucky I actually am to be here today. But like, what they've gone through, I still know that I'll never fully understand. But now I can actually really appreciate that. And like you said, Lily, you can't change anyone. You can't pick apples off an orange tree. I always try to explain but I think it's a validation thing. I always wanted that validation from my dad, from my mum, telling them how well I was doing, telling them every day about a program I'm doing or a guest speaker show that I'm doing. I think I always needed that validation from them, but I've realized now, being in recovery, that I no longer seek that I'm content with who I am and what I'm doing. And people work in different ways. They're a different generation, Lily.
Yes.
We're a different generation growing up now. My parents were very sad. My dad didn't know about addiction. He never heard about ice or methamphetamine or what it was. So it's really difficult these days to work with family members, and sometimes the fathers or the mothers don't understand the powerful nature of the drug.
And just the gift that you're giving them with this child, the gift you gave them when you came out of recovery,
yes,
the gift you gave them when you picked a partner and you got married, but this gift of a child, of your own children, the first of however many,
you're right,
that is just an amazing gift for them.
You're right, Lily. Maybe I still haven't really let it sink in and understand what actually is happening, but and that's where I work through my 12-step program. My amends, which is step 8 and 9, I automatically wanted to make amends to my parents or to pay them back or just to say sorry. That's not what it's about. My amends to my family and my parents is just staying in recovery. And
really, thank you so much for being with us. We're running out of time.
Sure.
But this is not just about how amazing and wonderful you are, which you are.
Oh, thanks, Lily.
But this is about you really appreciating yourself and you knowing how amazing you are, not for all the things you're doing for everyone else, but you as a human being, what you've gone through and what your journey is.
Thanks, Lily.
And what you've got to give to future generations.
And yourself as well, talking about and having people on the program, and even the nature of your show, I guess it's so important. That's why I'm trying to get my dad and other people to sponsor the program, or J-Air, to reach out to more people in the community so they can listen in and they can have an understanding and people can actually change the way they think and feel through your show.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So look forward to having Paula on sometime, actually, after she's had the baby.
Yes, I think
we'd love
afterwards.
to sit and talk to her as well. And to your parents down the track as well.
Sure.
So fabulous.